Hey y'all, Rick Sky here. Welcome back to another Timepieces for Tomorrow video. Now today I'm going to review Roy's wristwatch collection. So I'm going to read an email that Roy sent me. Roy said, "Hello, I recently came across your YouTube channel and really enjoy watching your videos. Your review of people's watch collection really seemed fun, and I thought I would send you my collection for your unfiltered opinion," and it will be unfiltered. "Please let me know what you think of my current collection and what do you think is missing from my collection. Do I need more diversification? Field watch, dress watch, palette watch. Please note, I realize I don't have a higher end chrono. I'm debating between the Tudor white dial chrono, which is the Tudor Panda, or the new Speedy Sapphire Sandwich, unless you have other suggestions. Below is a summary of my watches, top row left to right. Omega Seamaster Professional Wave Dial with steel bracelet and rubber strap. Watch I wore the most in 2021. Can't stop looking at the wave dial when on the wrist. Grand Seiko Snowflake Spring Drive. Became a huge fan of the Grand Seiko. This thing sparkles like a diamond with the amazing polishing. Best finishing of all my watches. Rolex Oyster Perpetual 39mm with Rhodium dial and blue dots. Tends to be my office watch. Tudor Black Bay GMT, my latest purchase. I love GMT complication watches. And now we're going to jump down to the middle row. The middle row left to right is Seiko Sarb65 Alpinist. And then the next one is Seiko Sarb65 Cocktail Time. The next one is Seiko Sarb33 Black Dial. The next is Seiko Sarb35 White Dial. And then Seiko Flightmaster Quartz Chrono. And then the bottom row, Squale GMT Tropical, not a true GMT, built with a ceramic bezel. Squale 1521 Blue Dial. I love the dial. It brightens my mood every time I see it. Orient Bambino Blue Dial, my first automatic watch. Bulova 35mm dress watch, over 30 years old. Quartz gift from my folks. My first dress watch for sentimental value. I still wear. Lots of great memories with this watch. And then the final is the Allender Turquoise dial. Figure I would jump on the Tiffany bandwagon for cheap and see what the fuss was all about. It's a fun color. I like it. If you choose to do a video of my collection, I would appreciate it if you use the name Roy. Well, Roy, I've been using your name, Roy, and we're just going to break this down here. So, starting at the top, the Omega Seamaster that you got, I think you did a really good job with that. Black, mine, the one that I've got's blue, but it's the older. You know, it doesn't have the ceramic bezel. I think for a current reference Seamaster, I think you did the right thing. You got the black ceramic bezel. You got the you got the red on the dial. I think that looks nice, and obviously the wave pattern as you mentioned. And I think that in this case, and I always say, you know, go with a bracelet if the wristwatch comes on a bracelet. But I'll tell you, with this Omega Seamaster, since Omega is still so dated with their bracelet for the Seamaster 300Ms, I think you did the right thing by going with the rubber strap. I think you did. There's just something about, and that's the complaint I have with my old school Seamaster 300M pre-coaxial, is that the bracelet just, it feels dated. I mean, it is dated. But I would have expected Omega, especially with the most current references, to have released a better bracelet, you know, something that's kind of tapered or something. You know, it doesn't look so old school. So you did the right thing. You did everything right with that. You know, great acquisition with that. The Seamaster on the rubber strap, that's a great thing. The next wristwatch, your Grand Seiko. That is a very interesting timepiece. Grand Seiko has started to become more and more popular. I mean, it's as you mentioned, I mean, the finishing on the Grand Seiko is probably one of the best wristwatch finishings in the industry. So, you know, you've got something that's very, very precisely done. Something that looks nice. I like you got it with the white dial, the polar dial. I think that looks it looks great. It's got the date at the 3 o'clock position, but doesn't have a Cyclops, which that's nice. I think that's a good choice. You know, just a basic Grand Seiko with a white dial, something that'll probably continue. Not that you're a flipper or a trader, but probably something you'll probably continue to appreciate. And something that's simple, having that white dial, something that'll probably be the most desirable. You know, sometimes when you get with those when you're dealing with Grand Seikos and you get into the dials that are the different colors and this, that, and the other, you stuck with basic white, you know, good job, very good looking timepiece. The next one, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 39mm. I think that's a 114-300 reference, if I'm not mistaken. The Rhodium dial, it's interesting that you went with the Rhodium, because with this particular timepiece, obviously the black and the white, those are the two most popular. Because if you know, you're probably aware of this as well, but the Rolex Oyster Perpetual in 39mm, it was discontinued, and the current references, you know, you don't have this color option. And also the current reference Oyster Perpetual, which is 41mm, it has the double batons, and that's irritated a lot of people. So I think you did an exceptional job here. You know, obviously straying away from, you know, you've got the white and the black with your Omega and your Grand Seiko, you know, two of your top pieces. But you wanted the Rolex to be a little bit different. I mean, obviously, you know, I can read into what you got here. This is not a Rolex that you ever plan to sell or trade. You know, if you had those intentions, you probably would have gone with the white dial or the black dial. But you went with the Rhodium, and I'll be frank with you, I think the Rhodium in this Oyster Perpetual 39mm, I think the Rhodium is the best, you know, the best looking of the options out there for the 114-300. And you say it's got the blue dots. There you go. See, it's all about the details of these wristwatches. So you got the Rhodium dial, but you've got the blue dots, which just makes it really really unique. And again, no date to mess with, no Cyclops to have to deal with. Just a very clean, symmetrical dial. You know, you did well with that. You know, that's a great Oyster Perpetual in my opinion, and 39mm is perfect. And it's interesting to see, you know, you're kind of across the board here. I think your Seamaster, I'd have to look up the specs, but I think it's probably a 41mm, and I bet the Grand Seiko is probably 40 or probably a 40mm. Obviously, the Oyster Perpetual is 39mm, and then we're going to hop on to the next one on your top shelf, which is the Tudor GMT, and that I'd have to pull that up. That's 41, I think. So it's interesting. You're kind of between the 41 on the larger size and the 39, you know, with the Oyster Perpetual. So that's a good range right there. The Tudor GMT, great piece. It's good to have a GMT in the rotation. Actually, I need to add a GMT. That's something I haven't added yet. I'd be curious to see what you think about the case thickness of the Tudor GMT now that you've probably had it for a while. Do you find it to be too thick or too tall on the wrist? That was a concern I had with it. I think it's a great looking watch. You know, I like that it doesn't have the date Cyclops. It's got the dome sapphire crystal. It's got the aluminum bezel that'll probably develop a pleasing patina over time. You know, it's a great looking GMT as long as that case thickness or that case height doesn't get into your head. So I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are, you know, after, you know, owning this Tudor Black Bay GMT for a while, if that's a problem, if it's not. I mean, cosmetically, build quality, everything, Tudor is just as good, in my opinion, as a Rolex. So you haven't done anything wrong there. I think of the top row, you know, obviously on the top, your best piece or your best pieces on your top row, I'll say it's the Grand Seiko and the Oyster Perpetual 39. You know, those are your two They're still stainless steel sports watches, but they're the ones that you could pretty much, you know, like you said, your Oyster Perpetual 39 is your office watch. You probably wear those two interchangeably to the office. But if you're going to a pool or some sort of party or whatever, you're probably going to wear the GMT or the Seamaster 300M. And without a doubt, you've got that slot, that empty slot up there on your top shelf, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to circle back to that. Let's jump down to your middle row, your second row next. In here, you've got a variety of Seikos. It's apparent that, you know, you're, well, it's obvious rather that you're a Seiko fanatic. Seiko was probably one of your first, one of the brands that you probably liked the most initially, and that would explain why you went with such a diverse Seiko wristwatch collection. And Seikos are good. I mean, again, it's, as you know, I mean, these aren't the Grand Seiko that's on your top shelf, but, you know, these are good, and you've got variety there. You've got a two-tone. You've got a distressed leather strap. You've got a NATO. You've got a different type of leather, like a holy leather strap. And then you've got a NATO with a, let's see, that last one, what did you say that one was? Let me see here. Sorry, I'm not too up on this. Oh, that's the Seiko Flightmaster Quartz Chrono. So you do have a Chrono, but obviously a Quartz Chrono, you know, very, very entry-level Chrono. So we're going to get back to that top shelf here in a minute. Now let's go down to your bottom shelf. Okay, Squale. I don't, if you're familiar with Archibald Chesterfield III, I think he would insert some very interesting words to describe the two Squales. Now, admittedly, looking at them in your photo, they look like you've probably worn them quite a bit. The one on the left actually looks like a pretty decent wristwatch, you know, from a build quality perspective, just looking at it in the photo. The one beside it with the orange, like woven type strap, not so sure about that one. So, and then we jump over to the Orient basic wristwatch on a, you know, on a NATO. You know, that's something you're going into a place where, you know, where things may be sketchy, and you don't mind if you get, you know, number one, you don't want to draw attention, so that wristwatch is not going to draw attention. It's pretty basic, but if it did get stolen, you know, it's not like you're at a huge loss. The Squales, even if you were in a bad area, they probably wouldn't even want the Squales. Now the next one, of course, that's sentimental value. I can understand that. Keep that. You know, it's bad practice to ever let go of of something that was gifted. So, anyway, with that being said, it is neat looking. The Bulova. It's got gold and leather strap. And then the final one on here, let's see, what was this final one? Let me see. The Allender Turquoise dial. You just wanted something with that turquoise color dial. So that was probably prompted because you were seeing you were shopping. You may have actually gotten your OP39, your Oyster Perpetual 39, after the 41mm references of Oyster Perpetuals released, and you were really wanting that OP Tiffany dial, you know, the one with the turquoise dial, but you couldn't get it. So you got this just so you had a wristwatch with that color dial, although you probably really wanted the Oyster Perpetual 41 with the turquoise dial. But yeah, it's you've done well here. You know, it's obvious that your obsession has evolved. So I mean, you know, you had your Seiko thing, you got the middle row of Seikos, and then you decided, hey, you know, I'm going to get the king of the Seikos, which is the Grand Seiko. So you got the Grand Seiko on your top shelf. So you know that pretty much trumps, well, by a long shot, trumps all of your Seikos. And then you've got this bottom shelf that, you know, you don't really care about except the one piece with the sentimental value. The rest of them you don't care about. That's just stuff that, you know, you'd probably wear if you were, you know, mowing the lawn or going to some sketchy place, and you still wanted to wear a wristwatch, but if it got stolen, you wouldn't really care. So I think that's your bottom shelf. The Seikos, I think it's something, you know, you probably spend a lot of time collecting those and you don't want to let them go. There's nothing wrong with Seikos. But those are ones that you could also wear, and, you know, not just if you're in a sketchy environment, but you could wear those if you just wanted something to tell the time. And, you know, if you're mowing the grass or whatever and weed eating and a rock flies up and hits it and breaks the crystal, you wouldn't care. But your top shelf is where you're heading. And your top shelf, you know, you've got Omega. So you don't have two of the same brand. You got Omega, you got Grand Seiko, you've got Rolex, you got Tudor. So that final spot, let's see. Based upon the Seikos that you have, I'm assuming you're probably older. So if my assumption's correct, and I never want to assume someone's budget, but I would assume that top right corner is for something really, you know, really special. You know, something, and I don't know what your stretch may be, what your relationship with authorized dealers may be. I'm assuming that, you know, maybe, and this is just a guess, but I'm assuming that the Oyster Perpetual 39 you probably bought on the gray market, because it was, you know, before everything became short supply, it was one that could be, especially the Rhodium dial, was one that could be picked up at a substantial discount for a brief period of time. So I'm assuming you probably got that from the gray market. You may have gotten the Tudor from the gray market, or you may have a relationship with a Tudor authorized dealer that may also sell Rolex. So your question as part of this email was, I'm debating between, let's see here, do I need more diversification? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You need more diversification for that top row, and you're probably going to need another watch box to accommodate. Do you need a field watch or a Flieger watch? I think is what they call those. That's up to you. I don't see a field watch as being a core component of a wristwatch collection. A lot of people like them. Now, if I was going to go with something field watch type wristwatch, I think the let's see, what color did they call it? It's one of the new Breitlings, and it's got the one that's, Google it. It's called it's a Breitling. They call it the one with this pistachio dial. If I was going to go with a field watch, I'd probably be looking at something like that. Dress watch. Well, you said earlier, as far as dress watch is concerned, and I don't know if your office environment is formal or what, but you said that you wear the, tends to be your office watch, Oyster Perpetual 39. So, you know, not knowing what type of work you do, would a dress watch be suitable, or do you need that stainless steel sports watch? But if you're talking about dress just for going out to like some sort of fancy snooty party or something like that, I think there is the need for a dress watch. I mean, nowadays, because everything's so casual, it's not really a necessity to have a dress watch. I mean, you could wear, you know, if you're going to a dress occasion, you could wear that Oyster Perpetual 39. There would be nothing wrong with that. You could wear the Grand Seiko. I mean, really, you could wear anything from your top shelf, because, I mean, sports watches, dive watches now, and GMTs, those are also acceptable in this very casual society. So I don't know if you need a dress watch. I mean, if you've got disposable income and you want to pick one up, I'd be looking at Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Control, or the Reverso if you want something that's got a rectangular shape. You know, that's where I would go. I wouldn't stretch. I mean, unless you're just crazy and want some, you know, crazy dress watch, I wouldn't stretch for Patek or AP or Vacheron. I think that's excessive. I mean, unless you just wanted a dress watch, it's just like, whoa, that dude's got a really nice watch. I think a Jaeger-LeCoultre master control reverso is more than enough. You're getting a dress watch. You're getting something that's high horology. That's where I would be going if you do dress watch. And then palette watch. I don't know if you really need that. I mean, when I think of palette watch, what immediately comes to mind is the Breitling Navi timer. You know, one of the older style references. I think that's, in my opinion, the Breitling Navi timer is the ultimate palette watch. Or you could also look at a, well, you've kind of got the Tudor GMT, so you kind of got the Pepsi type thing, like the Rolex Pepsi equivalent or semi-equivalent covered. So I don't know if you really need that. Let's see, and you said, please note, I realize I don't have a higher-end chrono. I'm debating between the Tudor white dial chrono or the new Speedy Sapphire Sandwich, unless you have other suggestions. Okay, here's the thing. And I'm a little bit biased here because, well, first of all, if you're looking at the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, I would not, personally, I wouldn't be looking at the white dial, the Panda. I would be looking at the reverse Panda or the inverted Panda, and that's actually the one I've got. And let me explain why I think if you're looking at the Tudor, why I would go with the inverted Panda, because the dial is, the primary color is black, so the white hands stand out. If you went with the Panda, the primary white dial Tudor Black Bay Chrono, those hands are going to blend more with the dial. So depending upon how old you may be, depending upon how your eyesight may be, I've got good eyesight, and I'm an old dude. But and then there's also the visual thing in there. You know, your wristwatches, from what you've illustrated on your top shelf, you know, you're going between 39 and 41 millimeters. Now, that chrono, that Tudor Black Bay Chrono, if you put a white primary dial on it at 41 millimeters, when you have that on your wrist, just because of the visual trick of having white versus black, that's going to make that wristwatch appear to be larger on your wrist. And I don't know, you know, from a visual perspective, if you would want to have something that just because of that color would make it look bigger. You know, and again, with it being a chrono, having the screw down pushers and the screw down crown, just having all those other elements sticking out at the 3 o'clock side of the wristwatch, that's also going to make it look bigger. I think that the Tudor Black Bay Chrono inverted Panda or the Tudor Black Bay Chrono reverse Panda, check out my videos of that if you haven't. I think that's one of the perfect chronos to consider. Number one, with the black dial, it visually doesn't wear as large as it is. I can switch between Tudor Black Bay Chrono inverted Panda and this right here, which is a Rolex Submariner. This is a 40 millimeter 114060. So I can switch between this and the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, comfortably wear both, visually wear both. Obviously the Chrono does look a little bit bigger just because of the nature of the case design. You know, having the screw down pushers and the screw down crown as well on the 3 o'clock side of the watch. But I can wear both comfortably. Now, you know, your question, you know, for the Chrono, for the perfect Chrono, if you're going to swim with it, keep in mind, if you go with the Omega, and again, I think the man on the moon, let's see, you had mentioned, let me fire your email back up. You're debating between the Tudor white dial chrono or the new Speedy Sapphire Sandwich. Yeah, I think the new Speedmaster Sapphire Sandwich, the moon watch, I think it's a phenomenal piece. Now keep in mind, the pushers on the Speedmaster they're not screw down. So if you plan to shower with it, swim with it, take it in the ocean, if those are your intentions, I would definitely go with the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, just because the Tudor Black Bay Chrono has the screw down pushers. And that's, now, if you're concerned with potential future price appreciation for trade or resale, I don't think you can ever go wrong with the man on the moon. You know, whether you go with Hesselite Crystal or the Sapphire Sandwich, honestly, I would go with the Sapphire Sandwich just because it would be something like, you know, I like to wear wristwatches, and knowing that the crystal was made out of hesselite versus sapphire, it would just get in my head. It would drive me bonkers. So for that reason alone, and I know that the hesselite, if you want to be true to what was worn on the moon, you would want the hesselite crystal version. But for something that you're actually going to wear, I think you're right with that. Now, you know, some other ones you might want to consider. Omega, you know, the Omega, was it the Heritage 57 or whatever? They've released an abundance of Speedmasters that look really good. But, you know, true to history and, you know, what's going to kind of always be iconic, I think you've nailed the right Speedmaster. But there would be nothing wrong with exploring some of those other Speedmaster options. Also, if you're looking at a chrono, you could consider something like a Breguet Type 20. That's an interesting chrono. You could also look at Breitling. Breitling has a ton of chronograph wristwatches. But I think just what you said, I think you're on the right path. I think if you chose between the Tudor Black Bay Chrono or the Omega Speedmaster, you know, the sapphire sandwich one that you mentioned, I don't think you can go wrong there. I mean, there's so many chronos on the market, but when you just look at things that are iconic, it's hard to trump the Omega Speedmaster. So with that being said, the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, I do feel, is going to become a future classic. Now, you know, will it continue to perform as well as Omega Speedmaster? Probably not. It's never been to the moon. But will it continue to perform well because it's kind of the, you know, a lot of people refer to the Tudor Black Bay Chrono as the Baytona, you know, kind of like the Rolex Daytona that you can actually get. You probably still have to be on a waiting list to get one, but you can actually get lucky and get one. Whereas with the Rolex Daytona, I mean, those are pretty much non-existent in authorized dealers. I mean, even if you have a strong relationship with a Rolex authorized dealer, you're probably not going to land a Daytona. So, you know, that being said, Daytona is out. Otherwise, I would have thrown, you know, the Daytona Panda into the mix, because I think the Daytona Panda is an exceptional timepiece. But, yeah, and some other ones you might want to look at for chronos. Zenith, or Zenit, if you pronounce it with the foreign accent. Zenit, they have some very interesting chronographs. And what you may not know is that there for a while, some of the Rolex Daytonas actually utilized a Zenith movement. So if you look at some of the Zenith chronos, there's a lot of different varieties on the market. Some of those are really good looking, and especially if you were buying on the secondary market, there's a lot of deals to be had within the Zenith range. Now, you know, and this sounds stupid, but I'll say it anyway. The thing with Zenith that's kind of been I've always had a mental block with, and I know it sounds stupid, I remember televisions that were Zenith brand. And I know that's different. You know, that's not the wristwatch manufacturer. But every time in the beginning, before I knew too much about wristwatches, I'm like, why do they make televisions and mechanical wristwatches? You know, that was a question I had in my head. And obviously, I was young and dumb at the time. But that's just one of those things. And a similar thing could be said about the Tudor Black Bay Chrono. Well, the Tudor is just a poor man's Rolex. So with that, you may feel like you're making a compromise. If you go with the Omega Speedmaster, Man on the Moon, with the sapphire crystal, I think you're going to have something that's exceptional. Especially the most current reference, Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon, because that bracelet that they have on it is exceptional. So unless you're planning to swim with it, or take a bath with it, or do more than just wash your hands with it, I think the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon with sapphire crystal is the one that you should get. And that's just my opinion. I mean, unless you're wanting to go crazy high end chrono, you know, maybe you're looking at Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, or Patek Philippe. But I don't think that's, you know, based upon looking at the collection you sent me, I don't think that's your style. And to be frank, a lot of those high horology timepieces, although they're very They're very good timepieces to acquire. A lot of them, they don't tend to have the... Omega makes a bulletproof watch. Despite the water resistance, that Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon, I don't think you would go wrong. But with that being said, the Tudor Black Bay Chrono is awesome. But again, you know, weigh everything in your head, because well, it's like if you get the Tudor, are you going to feel like you just made a compromise? And Tudor's not that way today. You know, since Tudor released Black Bay, Tudor has completely revamped their brand image. You know, Tudor is no longer a compromise. Tudor has its own identity. It's got its own wristwatch references, and they're super high quality. But, you know, that's just something as a consumer that you might want to be you might want to run through your head ahead of whatever acquisition you may choose to make, because if you don't, you know, then you could have buyer's remorse. But I don't think there would be any way with an Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon, whether it's Hesalite or Sapphire, I don't think there's any way to acquire that and say you've done something stupid. Because here's the thing, if you ever decided to sell or trade, you know, it's just a wristwatch that maybe you don't care as much about as you thought you might, or it doesn't get as much wrist time as it should. That's probably a wristwatch that'll probably continue to appreciate. So the possibility of selling or trading in the future, if needed or desired, would probably be pretty easy to accomplish. And I can't say, you know, how is the Tudor Black Bay Chrono going to perform? Tudor Black Bay Chrono in the secondary market right now is on fire. Is that going to continue? I mean, it's hard to say. But if you do go either of those, Tudor or Omega, I would definitely purchase from the authorized dealer. You know, those are ones that you want to get from the authorized dealer. If you have to wait a little bit for the Tudor, if that's the one you go with, that's fine. Now, if you're going with Zenith, definitely try to get it on the secondary market, because there are some bargains to be had. And if you're getting anything else, shoot me an email, bounce ideas off of me, and I'll be happy to film another video responding to those curiosities that you have. But yeah, I think you've done really well, and I think that you've you know, your collection has evolved. You're going to fill this particular box up with whatever chrono you get, and then inevitably you're going to have another box, because you're going to want to continue your top tier acquisitions. And that's the phase you're at right now. You know, you're on the top shelf of the game, and you've just run out of slots. You got one slot for the chrono, and then you got to get the next box. But you're probably never going to sell or trade any of these. You just don't seem like that type person, and that's perfectly acceptable. But and that, by the way, that's a nice box. I like that. That looks really nice. It keeps them. There's enough separation among the wristwatches where the crowns don't hit the case beside it. I wish I had a box like that, man. I just got a little cheap. I got a little cheap watch box that, you know, they're just side by side. That's a very nice box. I like that. But yeah, you've done well, and you know, you're obviously addicted to this, because you know that's emphasized by what we just went through within this video, and that's how you started with Seiko. You were a Seiko dude, and you got the Grand Seiko, and now you're trying to do one piece per brand. At least that seems to be. Although the fact that you mentioned the Tudor Black Bay Chrono with the Panda dial, with the white dial, that suggests you really like Tudor. So I would be curious to know, you know, you've got the Tudor GMT. When and where do you wear that? You know, you said you wear your OP39 to the office primarily, but where do you wear your GMT? And it's funny, also your GMT, you said that was your latest purchase. I love the GMT complication watches. So I think you've gone down, and this is a total guess, but my assumption would be that probably the order of acquisitions here was, obviously you were Seiko first. you got the bottom shelf. You know, one of those was a gift. That doesn't count. The other ones, they were just things that you bought just so you could fill another slot in your watch box, if you even had a watch box at that point. And then the top shelf, I would say you probably got the Omega first. No, I'm sorry. You probably got the Grand Seiko first, because that's the king of the Seikos. So, you know, you establish that. It's like, okay, top shelf, you know, Grand Seiko, top of the ladder here. And then you probably got the Omega, and then you're like, well, this is cool. You know, I like the Omega. I got the rubber strap. You may have tried on the Omega Seamaster 300M with the bracelet as well, but it may not have been. You may have gone with the rubber strap just because it was cheaper to get it on the rubber strap. You probably got it on the secondary market. But actually, you did the right thing with the rubber strap with the 300M because it's more comfortable. Then you started getting into Rolex. So now, earlier I said the OP39, you probably bought it on the gray market because that Rhodium dial could be had at a significant discount. But it could have been one of your first acquisitions from a Rolex authorized dealer, because you got that, so you scratched the Rolex bug. You know, every man needs a Rolex. So you got the Rolex, you know, that's one and done, you're good. And then you discovered Tudor, possibly at the same authorized dealer. And you got the GMT, and you're like, wow, now I got a Pepsi. And now what do I need next? So it seems like you've established a relationship, and it seems like you probably wouldn't have a problem getting a Tudor Black Bay Chrono with a minimal wait time. So, you know, I think you're on the right path. Some people, you know, some collectors, that's all they collect is Rolex. Some people like diversification. But with your collection, you know, what I see is that you've been around the block. Again, started with Seiko. You got your Grand Seiko. It's the king of the Seikos. Very well-designed timepiece, without a doubt. Grand Seiko is great. But then you're like, well, I need a Rolex. I know. And then you get the Omega, which is just as good, and it is, build quality-wise, historical significance, you know, the connection with James Bond, this, that, and the other. Yeah, you could argue Omega and Rolex, and I will tell you, Omega and Rolex, build quality, this, that, and the other, I think they go hand in hand. But you still had to get that Rolex, and that's why you got the OP39 with the Rhodium dial, and now you've discovered Tudor. And it's interesting because I think you're another person that has been kind of lassoed by Tudor, for lack of a better way to say it. Because once you go around and explore all these different wristwatch brands, when I say all these different brands, I'm talking about, you know, brands like you've been exploring, like most of us do. We're not talking about the high horology. That's a different animal, different type of enthusiast. But I think you've discovered that Tudor is exceptional value, and it's you know, since they released Black Bay, it's a very, very good looking wristwatch, wear anywhere wristwatch, and probably something that will continue to appreciate in value if that's something that is of concern for you. I mean, ultimately, most people, unless they just don't care, most people would like to acquire something that may increase in value should they ever want to trade or sell. But yeah, I think you've got the Tudor bug now. So thinking back from what I said earlier, I don't think the Tudor, the negative negative things that people may think in their mind about Tudor, I don't think you would think that way about Tudor. So I think the decision you're probably going to make between the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon and the Tudor Black Bay Chrono is probably just, you know, once you have them on your wrist, which one do you like the most? And, you know, maybe if you do have a relationship with a Rolex authorized dealer that sells Tudor, maybe they sell Omega also. So maybe you could, you know, what I would suggest, put that Omega Speedmaster on your wrist, and then put the Tudor Black Bay Chrono on your wrist. Trust me on this. Try the black one. Don't just go with the Panda. Trust me. Try the black. I know you said Panda, but trust me. Try the black. But these are my opinions. And Roy, I really appreciate you emailing me. Always fun to do these wristwatch reviews. I hope you had fun watching this. And everybody else out there, I hope you all had fun watching it. And speaking of that, if you have a wristwatch collection also, or maybe just a wristwatch that you'd like for me to review, send me an email, review@timepiecesfortomorrow.com. And again, all of this is first name only or nickname, whatever you want to call me. You know, I'm having, whatever you want me to call you, rather. I'm just having fun with this. So if you want to send me some photos or a photo, it's, it's a great way to just, it gives me an excuse to film another video like this one. So Roy, good hearing from you. Great collection. And if there's any questions or anything you have, or if you want to do a collection update in a few months or a few weeks or a few months or a few years, send me the photos and I'll be happy to post a follow-up review. Thanks for your viewership, everyone. Be sure to subscribe when you do. Ring that bell icon to be notified whenever I post another video. Check out all my Timepieces for Tomorrow merchandise like t-shirts, sweatshirts, stickers, coffee mugs, pint glasses, and more. You can find it all linked down below. Y'all have a good day. Thanks again for watching this video, and want to remind everyone, be sure to subscribe and ring that bell icon when you do to be notified whenever I post another video. And if you've got a wristwatch or a wristwatch collection that you'd like for me to try to review with an upcoming video, send me an email, review@timepiecesfortomorrow.com. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.